Looks like the lobby doors have slowed a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and just kind of introduce myself, and then we'll introduce each other, and then we'll get kind of jump into the session here. And I just want to welcome everybody. I'm Paul Johnson. I'm the EVP of Americas for PTV Logistics. I am located in lovely Knoxville, Tennessee in the US of A. And I have about 20 plus years of operations and logistics technology experience. And I am joined by my colleague.
Good morning, Paul, and good afternoon or good evening to all of you. I'm on the Westfalen, also 20 years plus experience, but in optimization, mainly in optimization, starting from a PhD in mathematics to founding Conundra, a route optimization company, to merging with PTV Logistics, where I'm driving innovation to make a global impact on logistics intelligence.
But ultimately, welcome to our session today. I'll kind of be playing a moderator, asking some questions. Many of them have been difficult to answer in traditional routing and route optimization applications, and often asked about our capabilities. We're going to specifically focus in today on our interactive logistics intelligent agent, better known as PTV Mira. And during the session, please feel free to ask questions via the Q&A, and we'll answer them in real time where possible, as well as we may bring some of those questions to the discussion floor, but we'll definitely make sure we follow up with questions to any or answers to any questions that we receive during the session. So without further delay, I'm going to jump in with An and our counterpart, PTV Mira. So An, as I said earlier, I've spent over 20 years in routing and transportation technology across the globe. I've managed systems that optimize, but sometimes are hard to explain. Sometimes it can get a little bit difficult when we're dealing with algorithms. Systems that report well, but do not help teams act. And plenty of AI claims that sound good until they really can't focus on transportation and they can't focus on the reality of a transportation system. What I want to explore today is where Mira is actually different and how and why she was built, and why that matters to route planners, network planners, operations, and logistics leaders. So ultimately, let's start with the foundation. About how and why Mira was built. What problem were you really trying to solve?
Yeah, so that's the million-dollar question we often get. And in essence, it comes down to the fact that modeling a route optimization problem or keeping it up to date with the latest changes in technology is hard. So PTV Mira was built to make transport intelligence more accessible, more explainable, and more actionable. All of our users know their own problem. They know their constraints. They know logistical problem that they're trying to solve. And you shouldn't need a PhD to model this. You shouldn't even have to care about the fact that you need to model it and how it works underneath the hood. So the goal was not to create a thin conversation layer. The goal was to create an interface into all of the APIs that PTV Logistics has to offer, so that you as a user can, first of all, do what you want to do, and secondly, ask questions on the results, modify any of your assumptions, compare scenarios, and move more naturally from questions to actions. So any question that you have, you should be able to ask. But maybe it's always a little bit easier if you can show these things. So I will start by demonstrating very briefly some topics. So let me first share my screen. First question, you're all seeing my screen? Paul, can you just, okay.
I can see it, yeah.
You're the only one who can speak, so that's I ask the question. But in any case, like Paul said, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A. It's way nicer to have some interaction than just to have this one-way communication. So you are all seeing my screen. So PTV Mira is built out of like two screens. On the left side, you have your chat, or your chat history in this case, in my view. And on the right side, you have optimizations. So there's always, not always, but most of the time, there is an interaction between a chat and optimizations. But the first thing that I wanted to show is that PTV Mira is actually also her own manual. So you can start off with just asking, you can just start off with asking, what can you do? And then also she's telling you, okay, I can analyze plannings, I can create and modify optimization, I can compare scenarios, I can do routing and geocoding, and I can visualize any results in histograms, bar charts, or whatever that you prefer. So I actually didn't like that answer. So also that's the same as when you're using any LLM. If your question is not being interpreted as you wanted it to be, then just ask more. So might tell me more is what she actually also did then afterwards. So she started explaining a little bit more on each of these topics, what you could do. I won't go into detail because we have a lot to cover today. Another thing that she can do is give you a view on what's hot and new, some hot and new topics. So maybe also here, these are bookmarks that she creates automatically. If you have longer chats, then she will summarize and you will be able to jump through certain questions, or I will show in other chats how this works also. So here I just ask her, okay, what's new in route optimization? I can also ask what's new in the last week or what's new in the last month or year. And then, of course, the year would have been more, but she now listed the new things of the last month, I think, that she displayed. So she was displaying new features, some improvements, and so on. So again,
automatic release notes.
Yeah, automatic release notes. And for each of them, you get a one-sentence explanation. But of course, you can then ask her, okay, tell me more about the new EV charging features. And then she starts explaining. So on any feature or any use case that you have in mind, you can just ask how do you solve this? How can it be used, and so on. So the EV features, explaining, okay, vehicle battery configurations, how it should be configured, how you can configure your charging stations, that was already there. And then the recent additions explaining that now you can also constrain the fact that certain vehicles can only charge at certain defined stations and so on. And also that you can add a charging cost per kilowatt hour because certain charging stations could be more expensive than others. And also something on visibility on the battery levels along the route. Then also something else, but okay, I think that's good enough. Let me quickly demonstrate also how to create and really do something live. So you can create optimizations by just importing a JSON file or by greenfield prompting in the chat by explaining, create me 30 orders in a certain region with so many vehicles with these profiles and so on. But let me just use the standard example, JSON file. You also have Excel files, uploads. Also in the chat, by the way, you can upload any Excel and then explain how the data looks like and how you want it to be transformed in an optimization. But I will here just use a simple example. So it's created, we'll start optimizing. And then I can, of course, start a new chat to talk about this route optimization. I could ask, analyze this result, but I won't do that. I will go into those examples later on. For example, yeah, I can also stop the optimization. I could also write it, but I've learned that you don't want to write everything. So if you have a button, then probably you will use it. You can go into details of any route, and so the chat always knows the context of what is on the right side. So if I'm now asking something, so how many stops does this route have, then the answer will be on that route. But I will, so something simple like filter on routes above 300 kilometer. So that's also something different. We could have pre-configured filters, or you can define any KPI on which you want to filter, anything that you want to zoom into. You can just select it and then ask her to do it. So it's really actions on top of KPIs. So yeah, she filtered on 2 of the routes. I can also ask it in miles. That's not an issue. You can even change it into miles in the settings and so on. So that's one example.
I think ultimately, if you think about everyone in the session, I'm sure a lot of you have pushed the button, so to speak, or waited for an optimization to finish. And then once that optimization finishes, whether you're sitting in a boardroom, whether you're sitting in a meeting or sitting in a dispatch planning office, you get the optimization. Boom, here's the results, here's your routes, here's your list of routes, here's your stops. But the first question everybody asks is how many routes, how many stops, how many unassigned, what's the cost, what's the stops per hour, what's the whatever the KPIs are. Was it a good plan? Is it a bad plan? What do I have to deal with before I go to execute this? So I mean, ultimately, how does Mira help us do things like understand costs, time breakdowns, vehicle utilization, and ultimately, like one of the biggest problems that everyone runs into is why is this order unplanned? Or why can't I service this stop at this time? Or you know, do I need another route? Do I not need another route? Those types of questions. How does Mira help after the results are where you are now?
Yeah. So in this simple example, I just also asked for, it was actually one of the suggestions. So on the bottom, you see that based on your previous question, you will get suggested follow-up questions. When I clicked on show cost breakdown for these routes, you could also just ask for the entire plan, of course. And then indeed, she will explain to you anything that you are drilling down into. So let me maybe, because I've prepared a lot of scenarios. Let me go to the analyze topic. So let me take a little bit of more advanced scenarios. So here I will again go to the top of my, my chat and look at the scenario linked to it. So I need to clear this filter. So here we're in Germany, and that's typically your first question, right? Analyze this result. You get all kinds of overviews on cost breakdowns, time breakdowns, histograms on distance per route, stops per route, duration, any utilizations, and so on. Again, these are randomly chosen, or at least the ones that we think are important are listed here. Some key takeaways that she sees. So she immediately sees that there is high vehicle utilization. So an average of 95% on duration and 96% on load. So you already see what the limiting constraint in this plan is. And then one of the suggestions was, okay, analyze the nine vehicles with a low duration utilization. And in the end, those were the ones who bumped against the load limit, of course. But then, yeah, you can go further. So also on the analysis side, in here, so you can go into settings where you also have global settings. I actually always use histograms and bar charts because I like that. But you could say that for any time that you ask analyze this result, you want a certain KPI. So for example, if you're very interested in seeing routes with a lot of air kilometers, then this is something that you could put in the global chat, and she will always do that. But okay, so what I here prepared was also on the input side. Okay, tell me what type of vehicles are we using in this scenario. And then she's listing, or she's also looking at the input data, and she's listing, okay, we have 4 different type of vehicles, different volumes, small ones and bigger ones. And then one of the suggestion follow-up questions was, okay, and what if you analyze the volume utilization by vehicle capacity type? And then we could see, and this was an interesting summary, of course, that the unused vehicles by capacity are, of course, make sense. The small ones are not used or used less. All of the CAP 40 and CAP 50 vehicles were used. And also, if you would look at the cost per order, again split by capacity type, you see that the highest cost per order are, of course, again, it all makes sense, but okay. This is just showing what you can do with it, are with the smaller vehicles. So then you can go further and then ask for your first. And by the way, in the bookmarks, that's then seen as a modification. So a creation scenario where you can filter and go to immediately. So yeah, if I click it, I will jump to this one, but that's okay. So create a scenario where I replace all the small vehicles with bigger vehicles. She's then modifying the input data, and she's always asking for confirmation. So I'm not doing it live. This is taking like a couple of seconds, and again, we want to show a lot, so that's not possible at that time. Because I'm a little bit impatient, so I don't like to fill voids. But in any case, you see it here. She's now listing, okay, I took all the vehicles with volume value 20, and I will change it to volume value 40. You then confirm. She does it. She launches the scenario, and then you can see the results where you now have a different. So this was the original one, and this is now the new one. And by the way, if you're focusing on a chat and you go to your overview, you immediately see only the scenarios that are linked to this chat to keep the overview a little bit on what is happening. And in the other way around, you can also see in which conversations a certain optimization is being used to jump to it. And then, of course, follow-up question, very simple follow-up question was the comparison. Is there a benefit? There is 4% cost saving, and other APIs improve as well, of course. And if you have a short look on your unplanned orders question, Paul, I also prepared one of those. So let me jump to that scenario. So again, why? So normal question, why are these orders unplanned? Let's go to the, so she said a lot, some KPIs, how many are unplanned and so on, but the root cause, distance from depot, where she's then listing, okay, the scheduled ones have an average distance to a depot. There are 3 depots, ranging from 5 to average of 240. The unscheduled ones are average 400. So yeah, the driver time saturation, a 9-hour window is not enough to do those for far away orders. So then you ask, okay, what if we extend the vehicle time, so the available time, with 1 hour? And then actually I immediately saw, because it starts optimizing, you see it on the right side, that we still had unplanned orders. So I just typed, we still have unplanned orders, do multiple scenarios at the same time. So first one with 1 hour, 2 hours, and 3 hours. And then she creates those all at the same time. So if we look here, you will see the 1 hour, 2 hour, and 3 hour scenario all created with the same. Yeah, actually this one was already created. So she only created these 2 additional ones. So she created them at a similar time. So very fast together, which is something that if you as a user need to manipulate data. And this is a simple example with the hours, but we will get more advanced. It's saving a lot of money. And then again, of course, afterwards, you just compare and you see the number of unplanned orders going down. Still not enough, but okay, still you have 13 unplanned orders, but this is the way to go, or increasing the size of the vehicle would be a next suggestion.
And I think that's one of the biggest things is being able to run scenarios in parallel, right? So if you think about that simple use case, which is, just adding hours, but ultimately, as making a management decision, do I need to authorize overtime or not? How much overtime do I need to authorize to be, because it looks like next Thursday is going to be really busy. So I need to authorize overtime, quickly run scenarios and say, okay, I need 2 drivers to run overtime, or I'm just going to authorize up to 1 hour of overtime for everybody, and I should be able to meet the demand. It's one of those things where in the past, when you're just looking at a single answer. You've got to sit there and set up the scenario, run it, set up the scenario, run it, set up the scenario, run it, and then compare. And now it's like, hey, let's compare three different scenarios all at once, and push the button. It's excellent.
Yeah, you can just define the strategies that you want to test, explain it in your words what you want to test. She will create the scenario. She will first explain to you what she will do. You can read through it, and confirm yes or no that she can create it. But that's indeed how it works. So maybe a different example. So again, I selected the chat, and you might have seen that these already changed. So let's go to this example. Yeah, I asked her to add mandatory driver breaks respecting the EU regulation. So I don't know that by heart. I do, but okay. Some people might not know that by heart. And she's then, of course, first listing what those regulations are. So on the driver breaks, after 4.5 hours, you can have a break of 15 plus 30 minutes. It's splittable or combinable. And you have work time breaks, 30 minutes for every 6 hours you work and 45 for every 9 hours, again, splittable. And then she's always, not always, but most of the time also showing some code snippets on how to model this in the API, and asking you to confirm. So again, we started with this scenario. We don't have breaks there, and then we created a new one where, yeah, it's a flash, so probably you haven't seen it changing. And then afterwards you can just ask, okay, analyze the break compliance, so were all the breaks added correctly, and the timing patterns. And then she's like, okay, how many routes have a break, how many don't, how many have 2, how many have 1, when were they positioned, so beginning of the route or later on in the route, what's the distribution, and so on. So all things that you're not necessarily thinking about. And also with the follow-up questions, I've been noticed with myself that it's like addictive to kind of, oh yeah, that's indeed maybe an interesting question, so let me go drill down with that next question. So it's kind of addictive to use these things. So this was a suggestion. I showed the 8 routes with early breaks and what's causing them, so and so on. So yeah, lots can be done. So cool stuff.
Yeah, I think, and lots of times, I mean, we're talking here about a lot of it is optimizations, but sometimes the questions are a little bit more simple, which, have to do with, what happens if I change from one truck to another truck or a truck profile? What happens from a traffic mode? What if I start this route at 8 o'clock in the morning versus 10 o'clock? What if I look at it from a historical traffic perspective that's time definite versus just average traffic? Those types of questions that are really just kind of looking at across the globe, ultimately, is this location reachable from this depot in a certain amount of time? Those types of questions. How does Mira help with that?
Well, again, it's the main purpose is to make it easier to access all of these capabilities in the context of a question. So PTV Mira has access to all of our APIs, so also the routing, geocoding, mapping, and so on. It has a focus on route optimization, but everything that is needed within route optimization is also accessible to her. So yeah, maybe again, show it as a little example. So within the same chat, at some point, I then also, so you were talking about fleet types. So one of the questions I asked her was, okay, what happens if you change 50% of these, all of them are vans, 50% to 40-ton trucks? And then again, she's creating that scenario. She's seeing which ones she will change, because of course we had the different types, I know, different depots. So she will just randomly take 15 of them and change the, so here you see the profile, van into truck, And in this case, it's with constant traffic mode, so not time-dependent traffic, which also could be a question, like you said, or just an instruction to her: don't use constant traffic mode, but use time-dependent traffic, and she will also change that one. And then, yeah, you get if you're changing from vans to trucks, everything becomes slower. So so if I go to the right scenario, let me see. So that's the starting one, and the resulting one is this one. Yeah, we see that we have unplanned orders. And then, okay, we start analyzing. We see that, of course, the vans, yeah, have a certain number of orders, trucks as well. Distances are being split per type. But then my question was, okay, can you create a histogram on the average speed for the vehicle types? And then, of course, you see that the vans on average, and also how many routes have an average per certain bucket, are way faster than the trucks. She displays it next to each other, something I didn't ask, but it's actually a quite nice of a representation. And then going from this one to the routing, I just can say select any one of the trucks and calculate the toll of that truck. So she picks a random one with a truck profile. She actually also filtered at that point in time, and she calculated the toll cost on that route.
So Anne, I have a question from the audience real quick that's kind of related to this. So the business or the question is, we try to send drivers to cities they're familiar with whenever possible. Is that supported by Mira?
Yeah, so supported by Mira. Mira knows everything that we're able to do with our routing API, route optimization API. And our route optimization API is indeed, it's possible to have the drivers know certain areas. So that's like, but maybe we just ask her, right? Just do it live. So what is the question? So I have drivers who are more familiar with certain regions and are faster in, that's the underlying reason, right? In delivering, they're faster in delivering those regions, delivering orders in those regions. And then it's always, how can I model this, or how can you model this? No matter.
So in this case, you're basically asking Mira, okay, how would you model this? And then ultimately put together the situation to be able to say, I'd like to have driver Joe go to the north. I'd like to have driver Sally go to the east, and I'd like to have driver Mary go to the south, right? And how do I set that up? Either through putting tags, those other types of things that are in the data, to be able to say this is a preferred or a recommended, and we can make that a hard constraint or a soft constraint.
Indeed. So you can have those hard constraints, soft constraints. She's now actually, because she's talking about task rules and categories. So that's a soft constraint where you can actually say that, so really say that they're faster. And so the rules can really affect delivery service duration in those areas. So if a driver has a certain category for an order region, so this is then the rule C. So driver region, north region, order region, region north, and then you have a task, a rule on that, that combination where you say, yeah, they're 30% faster in that region. That's how it's done. And then you could also ask her to implement it on your data. And then once she did it, you just download the request to see, okay, this is how I need to model it, because in the end, you do need to implement something yourself. And this is very useful to increase the speed of any implementation. Also for us internally, if we have any implementation with customers, it's really, really helping our consultants to model the exact problems of our customers. Yeah, what was I?
Yeah, so I think
just
one, yeah,
it's okay.
another thing, yeah,
Yeah, go
another
ahead,
thing that I
go ahead.
think would make sense to go into at this point, based off a couple questions that I've seen here, would be the
Yeah.
one in terms of if I can take a data set and set up a scenario where I'm going to either use last year's volume or I'm going to increase or decrease the
Okay.
percentage of either orders to be able to basically do kind of a scenario analysis. Is that something that's easily done?
It's easily done, and it's actually also one of them that you said it would be good to demonstrate, so I prepared it. So so let's go into this one. It's actually just, again, I think we started from a certain scenario. Actually, after greenfields optimization, which if somebody's interested in how that's done, can also walk you through it. But so this one is actually really what happens if my order volume grows with 20%. And this is an open question. And in that case, Mira will generate 20% additional orders similar to your current orders. So in the regions you're already at, with certain characteristics that your orders have. So time windows similar to the ones that you already have. Volumes ranging from A to B, similar to what you already have, and so on. So she will generate random data, but very smart random data. Or you could just upload an additional data set where you just upload an Excel file or any other format, and you say, this is my additional volume. I want you to add it to this scenario, and then see what happens. Right, so then it's again, she's creating the scenario, and she actually, I also, this is also something which is quite cool. If you want to test certain things, tactical, strategical level, you always need to compare an optimization to the original one at the same runtime. So after a few minutes, so even if your original scenario optimized for 30 minutes, after 2 minutes, you could also already see the trend. And in this case, I actually also asked how long did the original one optimize. It was set for 15 minutes, but I stopped it after 3. So actual runtime 3 minutes. So I said the current one is actually only optimizing for 2 minutes. So can you compare with the original one at 2 minutes? And that's something that you can do. So and then here you see, okay, your volume grew with 20%, but your routes, you only need like 15% more routes, and the costs increased. So after 2 minutes, I would advise to have it optimized a little bit longer, and then probably these percentages will go down a little bit as well. But yeah, this is how that kind of scenario works.
And a follow-on question to this, what about redistribution or understanding where my fleet is today? So in this similar scenario here, I've got depots, but I may have some fleet allocated to one depot versus another, and I may have a total number of the proper trucks in my network, but if I redistributed them, I'd actually be able to drive efficiency.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites because I think it's really quite strong. And I'm also not sure that a lot of our competitors are able to do this. So here, again, I started from this original Germany scenario, and actually I wanted to add a depot, but adding that depot, so I will go to the end situation, did a lot of analysis, did actually 10 simulations at the same time with potential new depots, and then saw that, okay, Berlin is the winner of it all. So let me go to the final conclusion. So open the Berlin. Okay, so this is where indeed we saw, let me open the Berlin one spect here. Sorry. Okay, so on this scenario, you see here, we added the depot in Berlin. The other 9 scenarios added the depot somewhere else, but Berlin was the best result. But Mira decided, or she also told me, but I didn't look into it at that point in time, that she would only put 10 vehicles in that new depot. whilst the other depots had 30 vehicles. So that was my next question was then, okay, but maybe I need, since Berlin was being used, all of the vehicles were being used in Berlin. Don't know where I could see that, but in any case, that was the case. All 10 vehicles were being used in Berlin. I asked, okay, do fleet optimization for these 5 depots, because that's a very, very real question. A lot of, yeah, all of us, if you have a fleet, you need to decide where to put. If they're all different or some different, in the beginning of your day, you need to, or beginning of a certain period, you decide where a certain vehicle type is situated. And you're already making a choice, which might be good or might be bad for your delivery scheme. So what we are able to do is really do this optimization. And what it does is really put all of the vehicles, so in this case, it's 130 vehicles, and we will duplicate them over all of the 5 depots. So we will get in total 650 vehicles. Of course, every vehicle, every one of those 130 can only be used once. So there is this, again, the underlying algorithm is able to do this. We're able to say, no, they're duplicated 5 times, but they can only be used once. And then you get this, this new optimization. And then you, in this one, let me see what so the fleet, new depot, fleet distribution. There you go.
One follow-on question when you're going into this on is I've got a question, which is, does it suggest where and how many DCs are needed for a better optimization based on client locations? So a brown versus a greenfield analysis, yes or no, related to this?
Yes. So multiple ways to do that exercise. So first of all, you can say add 1, keep 4. So we started from a 4 situation and we said, okay, add 1. I will go into the example where, so the next step that we did in this scenario was, okay, we now have 5, but our fleet needs to be reshuffled. And then you could say, okay, actually, I think 5 is a good number, but do a greenfield analysis on where those 5 should be. So the 5 is something that you need to give, at least currently. Not saying that next week we will not figure out what the optimal number will be, but in any case, you can do a greenfield analysis for 5, 6, 7. You will have an idea of what. So it is because of you can do it in parallel. At the moment, we are not suggesting how much you can do, but we can optimize entirely greenfield or brownfield, saying 5 completely free, or take 5 out of these 100 possibilities, or you need to take 5, but these 2 you need to keep. All of that is possible. So here, just to go before we go to the greenfield situation. So adding Berlin with the 10 vehicles saved us 12% costs. Optimizing the fleet doubled that saving. So that's just to show how significant these kind of exercises are to really put your vehicles at the right depot. And then from here, indeed, we can go into the greenfield optimization, greenfield depot. So again, we started at the top with this one. So that scenario, same scenario. And I asked that question, if I want 5 new locations for these depots, how can I do it? And you don't need to keep any of the current ones. So it's explaining how to do it. I'm answering the question. So the optimizer can pick 5 locations freely based on my order data. So really greenfield one. And then, she's creating 2 scenarios. One to create the greenfield. Let me go here. I actually think it's this one. The greenfield optimization. You probably have we'll go back to the original one for you to see. So mainly on the top, we lost the depot. So Greenfield is saying, no, these are actually the depots. So I'm then asking, okay, where are they? She's then summarizing, these are the locations. And then of course, you might see that the technique that we're using is not, are not the real routes and also not all the constraints of the orders. But then we do a real optimization with the actual orders and the complete fleet that we have available. So we do the full test again, using all those vehicles. And then you see if we started the full test and we want to compare, you see that we save compared to the original, which was the already with the 5 depots and with the 24%, we save an additional 2% on the cost and an additional 10% kilometers, which is again quite huge. But we're not changing our location of our depots every day, so we need to take this with a grain of salt, I think.
Yeah,
but it's really cool because I did get a question of one of our customers who said, yeah, I want to go from 200 depots to 60. And I was in that conversation, one of my sales colleagues was next to me, and he said like, yeah, you're also sales at Paul, but no offense. So he immediately said, yeah, that's really easy for PTV Mira. And I was like, choosing 60 out of 200, that's like 10 to the 50th possibilities. That's huge, even for PTV Mira, that's really, really difficult. But then we came up with a strategy how to do this, and it 100% works. So you can now ask those kind of questions, which is quite crazy and nice to do. Took me a long time when I was a supply chain consultant to do those kind of exercises.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, not just to do the exercise, but also potentially multiple applications to be able to do things like that as well. So I think one of the other uniquenesses that probably would be good to talk about relative to multi-depot environments is not only the strategic use case, which is, how many should I have, where should they be, and should they service this customer, but the ability to be able to actually dynamically service customers if you're set up from a warehouse perspective to be able to fulfill dynamic regions where we can actually help assist in making the decision on a day-to-day basis, whether, warehouse 1 should fulfill this customer on Monday and warehouse 2 should fulfill this customer on Tuesday. Can you kind of talk through that a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's it comes down to having the capability in your optimization, yes or no. But that one, if you explain it like that, so typically, if you have the dynamic choice of delivering a certain region from depot 1 the first day and depot 2 the second day, so you can really choose every day where you deliver it from. You're also organized with line hauls, bringing your goods to your depots, and typically then you want a discrete number, so actually linked to the size of your line hauls, discrete number of distribution trucks or vans to depart from those depots. And also that is something that we're able to do, just make sure that we steer, we know the line haul cost, we take it into account, and we optimize taking it into account that you want to have a certain cost per volume departing from a depot. And that cost is linked to your line haul. So don't know if you want me to. I can ask
and then just one other question that I just wanted to, I think would probably be applicable to the broader group is, and not that you have to demonstrate anything here, but just the question came up whether or not Mira can help with geolocations and the ability to geolocate or correct addresses. And then also the limits on the number of locations that you could actually have in an optimization.
Those are two questions. So the geocoding, so all the PTV geocoding APIs are integrated in PTV Mira. So if you would upload an Excel file with only addresses, then we will be able to first geocode those addresses, and the other way around, because I think this data set doesn't include, it was just created with latitude, longitudes. So I could ask the question, where are my depots located? And she will reverse geocode the coordinates into addresses. So everything there, and also places linked to, so maybe the refueling example, I just asked to create to one of them, just to demonstrate. I asked to create a back and forth between Sofia and Brussels, and I asked to put refueling stations on the route, so you can see that if I go to the orders tab, you see the pickup and delivery are in Brussels and Sofia, and in between we have refueling possibilities. And that was just something that I asked, make sure that you put them on the route between Brussels and Sofia, just to, so that's possible. Next to that, the number of locations of orders and an optimization. The limit is now put to 50,000, but actually I know that we can go to 100,000 or even more. But at the moment, the limit for the users is at 50,000 orders and 5,000 vehicles, I think, which is already quite big.
As long as you have the appropriate license.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, of course, we have advanced licenses and the basic licenses, and of course the basic licenses are not equipped to solve those kind of problems. That's in yeah, correct.
So I know we're coming up on time here, and I think one of the things that as we're going through this, sometimes we take a look at some of the details of what kind of Mira can do. Some of the things are ultimately it's building on top of. You mentioned a few times it built. Mira has full access to all of our APIs, and so it's a combination of optimization, route planning problems, electrification, refueling, a whole lot of things that we basically pulled together inside of PTV Mira. And then the ability to do, network analysis and depot analysis at a network planning perspective, both from a strategic use case as well as a daily use case. So, I mean, any final thoughts in terms of summarizing the real power of what Mira has brought to the user in terms of outside of just the conversation that you just had and showed with PTV Mira? I know I talk to her every day, ask her questions just as if I'm learning how to prompt with her a little bit better every day. But I've literally just said, hey, build me a network of X number of stops with variable delivery based off of 2 minutes per pallet, and and the next thing I'm modeling. So any conclusion or thoughts on before we let everybody get back to their day jobs or afternoon jobs?
Yeah, maybe so. The first idea was, okay, let's make it our life easier to implement customers, and this, seeing the possibilities of this and the ease of use suddenly shifted to, hey, wait, we need to give this to our customers as well, because the insights that I have learned also just by playing around with it and looking at customer data and analyzing, okay, how do the time windows look like? What happens if, and maybe this is a little bit strange, there is no overlap. What happens if I create a little bit overlap in those time windows, and the gigantic savings that you can really find by doing that? That was for me quite mind blowing. So I'm a little bit difficult, I think, my personality. So I'm not easily impressed, but I have been really, really amazed by what the speed at which we are able to do stuff with PTV Mira. So I'm very excited about what you can do, and I'm really, really, so it's not worth anything unless, of course, our customers start using it as well. But I have been working with an early adapter group, to shape her. They also say that they don't recognize her now versus the first version that they have been testing, which was like a period of 5 weeks. And all of them are like, yeah, this is doing so much more than we even expected at the beginning. So I would say, yeah, just I hope that a lot of our customers and maybe non-customers at the moment really want to try this and give feedback, because we can still improve. That's always the case. It's really nice to get feedback on that one.
Yeah, and I know that there's a lot of detailed questions that are coming into the Q&A and chat at this point in time. We will once again follow up with an answer to all of those questions and basically send it out to everyone in a list of kind of FAQ type of thing from whatever came from this webinar. But I think ultimately, as we look at this capability, the biggest thing to think about is PTV Mira sits on top of your existing optimization capability, whether you're using our developer API optimization or whether you're using our OptiFlow, UI-based application. It's really working in conjunction with that capability. So PTV Mira is working alongside your daily operation. So it's allowing you to take a look at your network in terms of how it should be built or maybe how it should be adjusted, but it's also helping you understand how your network should behave today. So it's looking at your daily operation. It's looking at the way that you actually are using today your optimization, and then potentially how you could change either business rules, constraints, physical locations, potential strategies that you have today. So that's one of the intents. I know there's a lot of questions about, PTV Mira versus OptiFlow versus whatever that's coming into the Q&A. Ultimately, it's meant to be in complement with the way that you use PTV today. And if you don't use PTV today, let's have a chat and we'll talk about it in the future and see how it can help apply to your business. So, on anything else, or you good to go?
No, I also see a lot of the questions now. It's nice to see. So okay, no, I think it's all good. We mentioned what we wanted to mention, and we will follow up on the questions.
Awesome. Well, everybody have a great rest of your day, and thank you for participating in our webinar today. Cheers.
Thank you. See you guys. Bye-bye.